Trying to send working. Got a little background noise there. So, Eric, I will let you take over, and you can finish the introducing yourself and welcoming everybody.
Okay. Right. Awesome. Okay. Hi, this is Eric Green. Thanks for everybody coming on. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. I went ahead and muted everybody to cut out background noise so you can clearly hear the audio. There is a chat function down at the bottom. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to go ahead and type that in, and we'll make sure we answer those. This is only going to take about 25 to 30 minutes to go through. We're going to give you a high-level view of what Richmond is offering you. And then at the end, I will unmute everybody so Ralph can close it out, and then you can go ahead and ask any questions that you have. The purpose of the day is to give you an idea of what Richmond is providing already, several of their large commercial accounts, but now they've got the infrastructure in place to support the folks that are on this call today. So that way you can get an idea if it's something that you're interested in, and then you can go directly with Ralph to go through the process of getting started. So before I get started, I want to thank, first of all, the Indiana Municipal Power Agency. That is a wholesale power provider in Indiana, in which they have several members. Richmond is a big player in that. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Indiana Municipal Power Agency. They're the ones that sponsored this and made it available to all the members throughout the state. Also want to thank Randy and Ralph and the rest of the staff at Richmond Power and Light for having the foresight and vetting us, and that we've gone through a long process with Richmond. They wanted to make sure that this was the right service for you before they provided it, and so they've done an outstanding job. So thank you to Richmond and Ralph and Randy and the rest of the staff there for making this available. Okay. Again, so if you have any questions, throw it out there in the chat. And then if not, I will just keep going through this real quick, show you some things, and then at the end, we'll open it up for any questions. Okay, so what we're doing here and what Richmond is providing you is the ability to have access to your information, the data that is being recorded on your meters out there. And these are Richmond meters. These are the cash registers for Richmond. And these are the meters that they are using to bill you with. And so even 4 or 5 years ago, it was taboo for utilities to provide this information. I don't know why. They kind of held this close to the chest, but that's changed a lot over the years. And so now folks like Richmond are allowing you, the customer, to have access to the same information that they're using to bill you with, that's updated daily, along with all kinds of tools and analytics that are going to allow you to start making some fundamental decisions when it comes to your utility, your facility. So as long as you have access to the internet, you will have access to this information, okay? So you will get your own username and password. You can have as many username and passwords as you want. We will also train you up on this. It only takes about an hour to make you dangerous, and you can literally get up and start it fairly quickly. So what you see here, it should see a blank screen right now until I make some decisions. Down here on the bottom left-hand corner, you will see some facilities, okay? Now, these are actual live facilities. I've changed the name to protect the innocent. Automated Energy, we've been around since 1999. We are a software-based company. We support municipalities like Richmond all over the country. Right now, we're in 43 states and 2 Canadian provinces where we have a pretty big following in Indiana, so we work with a lot of municipalities in Indiana. We were able to, Ralph, to put in one of your actual Richmond sites in here. And again, I've changed the name to Protect the Innocent, but this is an educational facility actually in Richmond that is using the service right now. So Ralph had requested that I show you an actual Richmond customer that's using this information. So they've been on it for a little while. So what will happen is when you log in, you will only see your information. So your username and password will allow you to see your information only. You will not be able to see any other customer's information other than your own. So in this case, when this educational facility jumps on, all they're going to see is their facility with their revenue meter, okay? So I've highlighted the meter that I want to see. Again, you will be able to, some of you on the call, I know the school district might be on the call. You're going to have multiple meters. I know there's one customer on the call, I think, that has up to 7 meters. You will be able to name these meters anything that you want. So that way, when you log in, you will be able to quickly identify which meter you're looking at. So in this case, we just call it the revenue meter. I'm going to go back a couple of months because I want to show you something that kind of popped out at me when I was looking at this information. So you pick and choose what information you want to see, okay? So If you want to see a day's worth of data, a week's worth of data, a year's worth of data, for me personally, I like to look at a month's worth of data. So I like to look at month to month when I'm looking at information. It just makes it easier for me since you're billed on a monthly basis. To me, I like to consume the information on a monthly basis. So what I did is I picked this educational facility that is in Richmond, using Richmond meters to pull up the information. So I pulled up the month of February, and what you're seeing here is half an hour or a quarter an hour, looks like in this case, 15-minute interval data for this facility, okay, for the entire month of February. Now, this is energy only up front because what we wanted to do when we provide this information to you is we wanted to make this as easy as possible for you to come up and glean the information that you need and to start making the decisions you need to make that will affect your bottom line. So let me show you right up front how this is going to help you and how it's helped some of the folks in Richmond already. There's two questions that this program that Richmond's offering you is going to allow you to answer very quickly. Question number one is, when did something happen within your facility that you need to know about? So when did something that pops out at you that maybe is out of the ordinary that you need to know that could be affecting your operations and, more importantly, your bottom line, and that is what you're paying Richmond on a monthly basis for your utility use. That's number one. So it lets you find out when something happened that you need to know about. Question number two, and this is really the power of the program, is the program allows you to identify how much that event actually cost you. So if you're a school district, for instance, and you held a tournament over the weekend at your high school, and you want to know what that tournament cost you potentially from a finance standpoint, from a utility standpoint, you have the ability to do that now. If you are an industrial operation and you had an unusual situation where you had to just go all out for a couple days straight to fulfill an order, you can go back and look and see how that affected you. Or maybe you're doing some testing on a regular basis and you want to identify how much that's costing you on your utility bill. This will allow you to switch the paradigm and go beyond just energy and demand and power factor and actually see dollars. So let me show you how that works. Question number one, when did something happen that I need to know about? So if you're looking at this right now, you should see my mouse pointer on here. I want you to follow my mouse pointer down at the bottom. You will see a date and time stamp down here. Right now it says February 10th, 8:30 a.m. Okay, and there is associated data point next to it. Now, keep your eyes on this data, this line down here, and you'll notice when I go back up into my screen on the graph that those numbers down there change. That's insignificant from a coding standpoint, but significant from a user standpoint. Because what that allows you to do now is you get a snapshot into a certain period of time, and you can find, just from a graphical standpoint, something that was out of the ordinary. And if you look here, I had two little peaks out here that stands out amongst the rest. So if I put my mouse pointer and I just rested on that peak, I can see that that happened on February 19th around 9:15 or 8:45 a.m. It also happened on the very next day on February 20th, ironically, around the exact same time, 8:45 a.m. So from a user standpoint, you now have identified, okay, out of this entire month of February, I had 2 days that were different from the rest. February 19th, February 20th. So that's a Thursday and a Friday. That's question number one. You've identified something. Question number two, how much did these two little peaks cost you? Because right now you have no clue. It's kind of hard to discern that. And up to this point, your only number one form of feedback that you're getting from Richmond comes in the form of your bill on a monthly basis, when it just gives you an odometer read and says, this is how much energy you used, this is how much demand you use, and this is how much you owe us. Now what Richmond's showing you is they're going to allow you to put this in perspective. So I've identified Thursday and Friday as an issue. Now I'm going to take this slider bar with the rates loaded in. I've actually got the actual Richmond rate loaded in for this educational facility. And if I were to cut out these two peaks, it shows me what the financial impact is. So let me show you this. Now, I heard there was some person in the room that walked in and said their eyes aren't that great anymore, so this may be hard for you to see if you're in a room and you're looking at a big screen, so I'll walk you through it. There are really three things I want you to see. Number one is this 10%. What this is that is your demand component. So these two peaks here, that's 10% above what your benchmark was here for the rest of the month. So that was a 10% jump over these two demand peaks over those 2 days. But more importantly, with the rates loaded in, what Richmond is showing you is that these two peaks over those 2 days cost this educational facility $4,200. Now, $4,200, that may mean nothing to you. That may mean a lot to them. It's all relative. Only you can decide. But the bottom line is this now gives you the ability to see the dollar jump. Now, I've seen this happen. We had a medical facility out in Colorado that had a 15-minute jump that cost them $13,000. That was huge for them. We had a school district up in Bremen, Indiana that had a jump over a day, over a Saturday, because they had a 10-year class reunion and they had a big party they're a small enough community where their high school is kind of like a community event center. And so they had a party on Saturday. They had an $8,000 jump. So it all depends on, what your thresholds are. But the bottom line is you now have that ability. And over here on the right-hand side, you'll see it says 13 hours. That's the time period in which this occurred, over a 13-hour time period that these two peaks occurred, that you would have to address this. Now, this is over a 31-day period, mind you, so it's not a big time period. So now the question is, number one, is this money big enough for us to chase this? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And question number two, if this is something you're interested in, what could you have done differently? Or is this something that you had any control over? And so what's nice about this is once you've identified some areas, with the touch of a button, you can point and click and you can zoom in at any period. So now what I've done is I've cut out all the distractions and I'm focusing just on these 2 days. And now I'm going to go even further and I'm going to look at this what I call the money threshold, and I've rested my mouse pointer there. And again, I'm going to take my eyes down to that date and time stamp I showed you earlier. And it looks like this crossed the money threshold on February 19th at 5:30 a.m. So that's when they crossed it, and they came back under it at 12:30 p.m. So now you can ask yourself, what was going on in my facility on Thursday from 5:30 to 12:30, number one. Number two, was it outside of my control? Was it inside of my control? And those questions vary. We had a customer, industrial customer, where they did some sort of testing every third Thursday of the month. And they set a peak when they did this testing. And so they were able to identify how much it cost them. Now, the facility manager didn't have much control over that testing, but he was able to go back to the chain of command and say, hey, every time you do this test, just know it costs us this amount of money. Now, that may not mean anything to you. Maybe it does. If it's something you guys want to address, we could possibly change this testing on a different time of day, maybe try to smooth it out a little bit, maybe not do it once a month. Can we do it every other month maybe? And we can save some money and maybe reinvest it back in the facility. The bottom line for you is it arms you with information that maybe you have not had in the past that allows you to start making some decisions that may affect you financially based on your usage. Now, again, over on the next day here, same time frame, usually it's around 6 a.m. So the first day was 5:30. This day it's 6 a.m. and they crossed it again at 11:45 a.m. So now you've got more information as opposed to what you're getting now, just an odometer read. Now what Richmond's doing is they're pulling back the curtain a bit and giving you some more tools, specifically this slider bar, so you can start making decisions. Now with a touch of a button, all I have to do is I can hit that, and now I'm back to the entire month. Now what's cool about this is you can start doing a what-if analysis. Like, for instance, what if I went beyond 10%, I dropped it down to another 15%? Now I'm at $6,000, but if you look over all the way to the right, I went from 13 hours to 50 hours, so a much more expansive peak shaving that you'd have to do, and maybe that's not reasonable. Or maybe you want to go up to just 5%. I've heard customers tell me before that they've had a policy where the chain of command or the leadership said, hey, let's have a 5% reduction across the board on our operation. Now what you can do is you can do a 5% slider bar here and start looking at, if we were to implement that, where would it affect our load and what would our load profile need to look like? So here you can see it still affects these 2 days, but now it's just 4 hours. So you can literally do this 5% across each month. That way you can go back to your chain of command and say, hey, based on historical analysis, that's an unreasonable request because here's why. So it kind of gives you an idea of where you can do that. Another thing that's nice about this is you can start pulling out some outliers. Like, you'll notice a little dips here along the way. I'm assuming, and if I had Ralph unmuted, he could probably verify this. I'm assuming that this educational facility probably has some sort of backup generation, and they're testing this. They're probably partially loading it. So if I zoomed in on it, I could see where this happened. It looks like it happened at 9:30 on this particular time, and it ended at 10:15, 10:30. So literally it was an hour. That's usually correlates to maybe backup generation. And this is happening on a regular basis. So I can zoom in and zoom out and look at that. So it allows you to start looking at some outliers. Maybe if something happened that was out of the ordinary, you could track that down as well. So that's just kind of a nice feature there. So that's right off the bat, one of the value adds, and really I could probably end the presentation, and that's enough for most people if they could just have access to that. But we're just scratching the surface. But that's how it allows you to jump in here, and literally a matter of seconds and minutes, you could identify some trouble areas really quickly. And I will tell you, you have some low-hanging fruit. Almost everybody on this call, you will be amazed at some things that you will find once you start having access to this information. You can even, we had one facility, they can even see when breaks occurred because the data is that sensitive. When you're looking at interval data, you can see shift changes, you can start to see breaks and lunch hours because it literally affects the load that much. Okay, one of the features that is very popular is our load profile reports. What's nice about this is when you get on this, like for instance, the school district, I like to use the school district as an example because you have so many moving parts. You have so many facilities that you have to deal with, and you have a lot of staff and a lot of people touching the light switches, a lot of people touching the HVAC controls. So there's a lot of variables introduced, and it's hard to chase this stuff down. But you will only be one person. There will only be one person probably getting on this thing on a regular basis. And at the end of the day, you are going to find something of merit that you need to report up. And maybe you need to send some information to a colleague, or maybe you need to take this to a staff meeting. And so at any time, all you have to do is push this load profile report that takes all the information that you see on the screen, the graph there that you see, and the associated statistics that goes along with it, and it puts it in a PDF report. And what you can do with this PDF report is you can email this as an attachment to a colleague. Like maybe you want to email this to a supervisor and say, hey, look, this issue that when we were doing some testing or when we had a power outage and we had to turn everything back on after the power outage, we set a new peak and this is what occurred. We need to discuss this. Or if you're in a staff meeting and you want to print this out and bring it across the table and show some people some things that maybe you want to address, this allows you to do that. This load profile report allowed a school district in Colorado to save $40,000 in the first 2 years just by showing how behaviors within the school was costing them money. And let me explain what he did. This guy was amazing. What he did was he printed out these reports, and he would take it to a staff meeting. He would take a big fat red pen, and he would circle these little peaks. And next to it, he would write the dollar figure. In this case, it was $4,200. And when it was his time to speak, he would just pass it around the group and say, listen, guys, when you guys had this meeting on this side of the junior high school, and then you had your other club meeting on the other side of the school, and we turned everything on, we set a new peak. And we set that peak, it cost us X amount of dollars. And when we did this event on Saturday in this gymnasium, we set a new peak, and it cost this amount of money. Now, if you guys will work with me, and if we could consolidate some of these and maybe not turn on everything, and you can see the impact it has, I can take this money and reinvest it back into the facility and put better lighting in that you guys have been complaining about, or maybe give us the latest and greatest HVAC system so we have a more comfortable school. And so these were all good people, the school, the teachers, and the principals and things alike. They just didn't have the data. They didn't have the information. But simply becoming aware and him showing them and educating them, they were able to make some behavioral changes, and he was able to report back. We have a study on it, and we have it on our website where they saved that 40 grand. And what was cool about it is they didn't do anything exotic. They didn't do any retrofit, nothing like that. All they did was became aware and started changing behaviors. We did a class one time, a training for a medical company, and in the training session, they saw they had a jump that cost them $4,000, and the guy asked his buddy, he says, hey, why is that occurring? They started talking about it, and what they realized is they were turning everything on at the same time, and he said, I thought we were going to stagger this. So one person thought the other person was doing something else, but the data was showing them that they weren't doing that, and they saw it right in front of their faces, and they said, well, let's stagger them like we said we were going to do, and they were able to save that $4,000. So it's just amazing when you start seeing the information and you start putting it in front of the users and showing them the impact, how the changes start to occur. So that's a nice feature that folks like. Now, one of the cool things that Richmond is doing for you is they've taken their rates and they've loaded into the program here. So now what you can do is start playing with it. Now, you will not see all these rates I'm showing you here. These are rates of different other folks across the country, but here there are two Richmond rates I have loaded in. This particular customer is on the LPS rate, the large power service rate. Okay, so the Richmond rates are a little, they have a lot of variables involved in it, so it can be a little complicated if you're not used to this. So if you want to get more information on your rates, you would want to follow up with Ralph or anyone from the staff that supports you there in Richmond, and they can walk you through your rate structure. But the bottom line is what this shows this educational facility for the month of February, this was their estimated bill. This is a nice thing for you to do if you just want to go back. Like if you're looking at some information here and you just want to quickly look at, okay, what did I pay that month without having to track down your bill or find what the bill was, you can quickly pull it up and get an estimate. And this is around $88,000 is what they paid in the month of February. Now, a nice feature, now this may be a little off because we loaded this in last night, Ralph, but I just want to show them what is the capability of this. And you can actually do a cost comparison. Now, one of the neat things that Richmond provides for you, and I will tell you this is a nicety, there's a lot of utilities that do not do this, but Richmond allows you, they empower you to pick and choose what rate you can be on. Now, if you have not looked at the coincident rate, I will tell you that shame on you, you should look at it, because I think for many of you on this call, there is some savings that could occur if you were on the coincident peak rate. And what this does is it allows this customer here to do a comparison. Now, they are on the LPS rate right now, and they spent $87,000. If they were on the coincident peak rate, what this is showing us, and I don't, now, this is a disclaimer because this may be off, and I will need to check this with Richmond, but the bottom line is when we've got this correct here, if this is the case, they could save about $30,000 if they were on the right rate. So you may not even be on the right rate. And so what this will do for you without having to manually calculate it, which is what Richmond had to do in the past, is now with the rates loaded in, you can do a comparison and see whether or not you're on the right rate. And you can do a month-to-month comparison. So this in itself could allow you to make sure that you're on the right rate, and it could allow you to go through that process. So that's a nicety that Richmond is putting in here. And again, we'll double check with you, Ralph, to make sure we got this correct. But once we verify that, you'll be able to do a meaningful analysis to make sure that you're on the right rate there, okay? Okay, let me make sure I don't have any questions in the chat room. Okay, what I want to do is move on to the next function here. And I want to talk about the detail report. Up until this point, everything's been energy only because we want to show you trends. We want to keep this as simple as possible, but inevitably, there's some folks in here that on the call that's going to want to do a more detailed analysis, and that's where we have the detail function. And when I hit the detail function, what you'll see down here at the bottom, it's a subtle change, but you'll be able to see it, is we have multiple columns now. Like, for instance, I've got a demand column. Now, you are billed on your demand, so you may want to see that graphed. So it's in red. I'm going to hit that button, and now I've got my demand usage overlaid on top of my energy usage. I can load my K-bars, I can load my KVA, and I can load my power factor. Now, what's interesting is you may or may not know this, and not all utilities do this, and I applaud Richmond for doing this because this is very important. I want to show you an example of a utility that doesn't do this, but Richmond does make sure that you have a power factor that's at least above 96%. If you don't know what the power factor is, I would follow up with Richmond. It's very important that you understand it because it affects your bill. Now, here, if you look at the power factor, it's in pink. I look at my legend. My legend tells me that my power factor is in pink. It's hard to read, right, because it's under a scale with all these other ones here. So it looks pretty flat. But if I toggle off all these other ones and just take them off, and I'm going to isolate the power factor because Richmond does bill you on power factor, you will be able to get a better idea of what's going on. So if you look here, their lowest power factor, because I'm putting my mouse pointer here, and if I go down here at the bottom, and you'll see down here there's a pink area here that shows you power factor if you look where my mouse is. The power factor for them, the lowest one's about 96%, so they're right at the threshold where they could get penalized. These guys are doing pretty well, but let me show you someone who's not doing well. I'm going to go to this Iowa high school, and just to give you an idea that don't assume that your facility has a good power factor. This is an Iowa high school that this would probably make Ralph throw up in his mouth a little bit if he saw this. their power factor gets as low as 67%. So they would get slaughtered under the, well, not, I mean, that's a relative term, but they would be penalized under the current rate system there at Richmond. So if you have a power factor that's below 96%, you may have a potential for savings in something that you want to address. All I'm showing you here is that Richmond is giving you data now to start looking at this information. Now let me show you how you can start managing this. And this is going to be really important for a couple folks on the call, because from what I understand, there are some folks on the call that right now you are manually going out to your meters and manually reading those meters. And I don't know if you're just manually putting them in the spreadsheet or what, but you can save a huge amount of time once you get on the program with Richmond. And let me show you a couple of ways in which you can do that. What I did is you can toggle this back and forth. And I'm a picture person. I went to public school in Indiana, in Anderson. I didn't go to the fine public school system in Richmond, so I went to public school in Anderson. I like to look at pictures, but folks on the call here, you guys are probably sharper than me. Maybe you like to look at numbers. So you can toggle this based on what type of analysis you're doing. But more importantly, for the folks that are on the call that's been manually reading this, you don't have to go out in the snow anymore and do this. All you have to do is pull up this information. You can dump this into a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, on whatever time period you're looking at, a day, a month, a week, a year, and you can pick what you want. You don't have to look at the power factor or the KVA. You can just pick energy and demand, or demand and power factor. But when you're working with large amounts of data, just know that you can take this information, dump it into an Excel spreadsheet, and plug that into whatever analysis that you're already using with your Excel spreadsheet. That's one way of doing it. Another way is you can actually go in and pull in notifications. So it's my understanding that maybe what caused, I think somebody on the call, I may have this wrong, but I think somebody on the call, maybe you guys had a leaky water meter at one time and you didn't realize it because you weren't looking at the water meters, and you discovered it after the fact, and you don't want to get bit like that again. And so you just went ahead and you're starting to look at your power meters now, and you want to make sure that something doesn't get out of control. So when you get your utility bill, you're not surprised. Well, now with this service, what you can do is set up a notification so you can notify yourself when anything gets out of the ordinary. Like, for instance, you know there's a power factor penalty now, right? So if you want to be notified, anytime you drop below 96%, you can notify yourself if that's important to you. Maybe you want to know if you go above a certain demand. Maybe you know that you shouldn't go above a certain, maybe 500 kilowatts is your demand threshold, and you want to know every time you go above that. Or maybe you want to know if you had an outage the night before, and if it zeroed out for any reason. Or sometimes you just want to know percentage. Like maybe if your load jumps by 15%, you want to know about that. So when you come in the office the next day and you get an email and it comes from Richmond, okay, it comes from the Richmond email, it'll come from maybe Ralph, it'll come automatically to you, and it'll show you that last night you had a jump of 30% of your load, and that shouldn't have happened. Now you're trying to figure out what happened yesterday, which is much easier to discern, as opposed to you get a utility bill 30 days later from Richmond. It's a lot higher than you expected, and now you're trying to go back and figure out what happened. So you literally can load in thresholds to get notified, so you will have no surprises whatsoever. Once you get comfortable with your system and comfortable with your facility and understand what your facility will look like, you can load in these thresholds. So this can be automated. Another thing you can do is you can actually load in some things that you want to see on a regular basis, with or without crossing a certain threshold. So what will happen is the first time you log in, you'll get this wizard that'll pop up, and you will only see your facilities. And it will say, what's important to you? So maybe you want to know what your daily demand is, and you'll check that. Maybe you also want to know your monthly demand. And maybe you want to know what your demand was compared on the same day last year during that same day. As long as we got the historical data loaded in, we can do that. And then maybe you don't care about the monthly piece. Maybe when it comes to your energy usage, maybe you just want a monthly report on this. So you pick and choose what you want to see, and then you tell us how you want it. Do you want it in the form of an email? Do you want us to send it to your phone so you can look at it on your smartphone, or do you just want a text message? And then that way, it's kind of like when you're driving on a road and it's a confidence sign, and every now and then you just may be zoning out and you're like, am I still on the right road? And you want to see that sign. It says, yeah, I'm still on 70 or 65 or 69. So you're on that right. This is all this is. It just tells you, hey, your demand yesterday was 250 kilowatts. You know, that's where it should be. And so it just gives you that confidence knowing that you're on the right track. So that's another way that you can reach out and touch you. That way you can have that information. Now, one other thing to think about, and this is the beauty of what we provide and what Richmond provides you, is we're called automated energy. So we can literally automate anything that's important to you. Like I just showed you how you could take this information and you can dump this into a spreadsheet. Maybe for the folks that want this information on a weekly or monthly or daily basis, maybe you don't even want to have to physically log in and you don't want to physically download this. We can automate that for you and write a script where this report is sent to you on a regular basis in your email with it attached to it. So the sky is the limit. You tell us what you want through Richmond and we can automate it and get that over to you. So we can literally start taking a lot of work off your plate, a lot of the mystery off your plate by taking this data and beginning to automate it for you. So it's a really beautiful thing. Okay, now let's jump into one of my favorite areas, well, a couple areas, and one is the comparison, and the other is historical analysis. Okay, for those of you who have multiple meters, like the school system, for instance, I'm going to use this Arizona Public School as an example. They have 4 different facilities. You can see they have their district offices, they have a junior high school, they have 2 elementary schools. I can do a comparison function, and I can literally compare those facilities against each other. So depending on what analysis you're doing, from what I understand, there is one customer on here, I think you have up to 7 meters. You can literally look at the meters from an aggregate standpoint, but then you can pull out each meter and look at them at the same time period and compare them against each other. So if I pull up my legend, I can see which meter I'm looking at. Now, I don't have time to show it to you for the, just want to make sure I'm just giving you an overall overview, but you can literally pick and see which meter is contributing to your peak. So if you have a coincident peak rate, for instance, and that's very important to you, you can see which meter is the one that's causing the biggest problem with your peaks and isolate that meter and then look at the equipment that's behind that meter and isolate what could be the issue and what's causing that peak. Like, for instance, this junior high school, on this day of this peak, it peaked much higher than the rest. Like, one example is we have a school district out in Texas, in Bryan, Texas. They have 2 elementary schools. I'm going to highlight these 2 elementary schools. Now, this isn't those elementary schools, but just to give you an example, I'm highlighting just these 2 elementary schools. These 2 elementary schools have the exact same footprint in Texas, but yet one uses more power than the next. So what they're going to do is they're going to start comparing these elementary schools and start looking at what are we doing differently in this one elementary school as opposed to this other one that's using much more power. So they're doing some investigative work. So it allows you to start maybe comparing like facilities that way. So just know that is there and that's available to you so you can do that comparative analysis. Now let's talk about historical analysis. This is a powerful, powerful tool and is probably by far my favorite function of this whole thing. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to go back in time and compare usage on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to February of last year. I'm going to overlay February on this year, and so I can start seeing the difference in those 2 months. Okay, these are like months, same facility. I pull up my legend, and I can see my blue is my historical analysis. My black is my current analysis. Now, what's cool about this is you can do a day-to-day, a month-to-month, or week-to-week. So let's say, for instance, you made a change on a Monday, and the next Monday rolls around, and you just want to compare the 2 Mondays against each other and see what the change is. You can do that comparison. Now, what's interesting here is these guys, they're in Richmond, this educational facility. They're like clockwork. It's almost like they're doing the exact same thing in February that they did last year, and you will notice they don't have as many of these little drops. Maybe they weren't testing their backup generator. Like you see how they were doing it in black here, but last year they weren't doing that. So something was different there. And also, they had the same peak structure last year they did this year, but not as high. So there's a gap. So they did something different this year as opposed to last year, even though it was the same load profile, but they used less energy. So maybe this had more students, maybe more occupancy rate, whatever the reason, something was different. Now, you just don't have to look at it from a graphical standpoint. You can actually pull up the statistics and do a detailed analysis. So here, they peaked out here, this local facility in Richmond, at 2,000 kilowatts. You can see that there this month in February. They did it at 8:15 a.m. They peaked out last year at 1,800 kilowatts, ironically, also at 8:15 a.m. So same time frame, same time in the morning, but well, not significantly, but pretty different demand than they did last year. And they used 1 million kilowatt hours as opposed to 980,000 kilowatt hours. So they used more demand. They used more energy. The load factor was worse than last year. So if they were expecting to have a better year, then they were probably disappointed. So what it allows you to do is if you make some changes, you do a retrofit, if you do something that hopefully will change your usage, then this allows you to go back and look at how well you're doing. And let me show you a poignant example. I mean, this nails it in the head as far as the possibility of what you could be accomplishing and could be happening in your facility right now. And you just have no clue because you don't have the data to show it. This is a medical facility in Arizona, and this is using the historical function I just showed you. They are not a 24/7 facility. They are a 9 to 5, 5 days a week facility. But if you look in the blue here, they were operating like a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week facility. You see that last year? It was just on all the time. What they discovered, though, is that at night, and now this is in Arizona, they were cooling their building down to 74 degrees at 2 p.m. when people were there working, and also at 2 a.m. when nobody was there. They were cooling their facility down at 74 degrees on a Tuesday and at 74 degrees on a Sunday when nobody was there. And they asked themselves, why would we do that? Why would we keep the facility cool all the time when nobody's here at night, nobody's here on Saturday and Sunday? So you know what they did? They changed it to 80 degrees at night and 80 degrees on the weekend. And you can see when they did it. They did it in April. And you can start to see the change in their usage as opposed to last year. Now, this didn't hit them financially much because they did it mid-month, so they actually paid $457 more. They were a $21,000 a month facility, right? They paid $457,000 or $100 more because they had set a peak already that month. But look the next month. The next month, if you look at the comparison to the same time last year, they saved $5,000. They had a 23% reduction from May of 2013 to May of 2014. They saved $5,000. The next month, they saved $9,000, 30% reduction in June. Remember now, this is in the heat of the summer. This is very important for them, this medical facility. And the month of July, they had a 34% reduction. They saved $12,000. That is huge. And all they did was they realized they needed to change their HVAC set point by 6 degrees. 6 degrees saved them, what was it, $25,000, $26,000 over a 3-month period. The question that everybody asks when we show this is, why would Richmond show us ways to use less of their product? It doesn't make sense, right? They would be losing money. Well, the reason for this, and the reason why Richmond is willing to do this, is because Richmond is a distribution facility, a utility. They also have a utility bill. They have to pay the money back to Indiana Municipal Power Agency for generating the power. They don't generate the power. Now, when I was a utility guy out in Colorado, I don't know what it is for you guys, Randy. I'm sure it's over half. But for us, for all of the money that we brought in, 70% of it we wrote out right off the bat back to our wholesale power provider. So it behooves Richmond, and it helps Richmond. If you are good stewards of your utilities and you are efficient, that helps Richmond because it lowers their utility bill. So when you're good stewards of your utility usage, that actually helps the entire Richmond community because they have to pay a demand peak to IMPA, just like you have to pay a demand peak. So when you help yourself, you help Richmond. So everybody wins, which is why they want you to show you this and hopefully help you reduce your usage as well. Okay, a couple more things and we'll be done. About 5 more minutes here and I'll be done. Just a couple little things. One is a nice feature that Richmond has that other utilities don't have, and that is this coincident peak feature. I changed the preferences from a line graph to a bar graph. So now what you're seeing is this 15-minute interval. If I zoom in, you're seeing it now in this bar graph presentation. The reason why this is important is if you look here, you'll see this little green tab. Down here at the bottom, you'll see this little red tab. If I pull up my legend, it tells you what it is. The green tab is the coincident peak. That is the day, the time period that Richmond, the entire system on Richmond Power and Light for the whole community, that is the day that the system is peaking and the time. And then it shows your facility peak. So it shows you, especially if you're on a coincident peak, how important this is. And I can zoom in on it, and I can even show you specifically. So this facility system-wide peak for Richmond was February 19th. It looks like it was at 11 a.m. And for this educational facility, they peaked out at 8:15 on a different day. That's why these folks would save some money. That's one reason why there's potential savings for them, is they're not even peaking during Richmond's time. So it makes sense for them to possibly get on this coincident peak rate, right? So that's one feature for you, and you can zoom in and you can actually see where it's at there, okay? Another nice feature that's loaded in here is if you go down here and you see our factors, this is where we put customizable features like weather. And we can overlay weather on top of the load, and you can start to see how weather possibly impacts your load. Like, for instance, it's interesting. You see the 2 coldest days of the month on this day, on February 19th. I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but Richmond looks like it was pretty chilly, about -3. They set a system peak that day. They were also even lower. Well, they were about -3. That's when this educational facility set their facility peak. So you can see the correlation in weather. For some reason, it's turned off here. I can't show it to you, but we do have the feature that allows you to look 5 to 6 days in advance, and we can actually, through algorithms based on historical analysis and the future 5-day weather forecast, we can show you what we think your load's going to look like over the next 5 days, so we can show you if a peak is about to occur. So if you are proactive and you have the means to do it, you can shift some things around and avoid that peak and save you some money. It's pretty sweet. The other thing that we can do in these factors is if you're an industrial customer and you're on the call and you have data that we can use, that you can send us, like for instance, widgets produced, we can take that data, we can add it as a factor, and you can literally graph it on top of your load, and you can see the relation between widgets produced and what your load is that day. For schools, hospitals, office buildings, if you can send us occupancy rates, we can actually show you when your facility is occupied to a certain capacity, we can show you the correlation and how it possibly affects your load. So if your facility is 80% occupied or 95% occupied, that probably impacts your load, and you can start to see that. So if you're a school district, for instance, and you're thinking about if you're hosting an event and you know that when that gym is 100% occupied, you're going to have a possibility of setting a new peak, that's maybe good for you to know so you can budget for that. So there's that ability there. Okay, that is the fire hose, man. I wanted to show you kind of the overall view of it, and we do have a question. Let me look at this. Okay, I'm going to, it's hard, it sounds like to query this data so that it can be put into a historian and can be easily compared to equipment starts and stops for current load. I need whoever asked that question, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mutes here. Whoever asked that question, what were you wanting from that? I'm not quite understanding the question.
This is Gary. I work at the Richmond facility. We use Wonderware as a historian, and we collect data for everything just about in our facility.
Okay.
What I was wanting to be able to do is to run out and query this data, or use historian to go out and query this data, pull it into our historian database where I can start comparing to equipment usage in our facility, rather than trying to have 2 trends and trying to match data.
Right. Yeah, so probably what you would do is put that information into the Excel spreadsheet I showed you, and then you can take that CSV data and plug it into the, I'm sure that's probably the common format that would work. And we could even probably set it up where we could automatically push that to you if you wanted it that way, so you can put in that data point for you.
All right, that may be the better way to push. I don't know what the push would be or how often, but that may be the better way to push.
Yeah, so you can manually do it, but if you find that this data is helpful for you and you want it on a regular interval, we can automate it for you.
Okay. Shows you kilowatts, cost, peak, demands, power factor, like for every room, for every building, you know, for whatever's on that building, okay. Meters on that building.
Well, that's
told him I was looking at some historical data since May of last year, and some of the buildings are down as far as kilowatt usage. So.
Oh yeah, I can tell you too.
So we're.
But they're saying is you take that savings and put it back in, and get
yeah,
more
yeah.
savings.
Yeah. Well,
So Eric,
Okay,
there's another question on there.
Okay, what's the other question?
How long is the data stored?
Oh, how long is the data stored? Okay, yeah, we guarantee up to 4 years where you can actively get the information, and then after that, theoretically, officially, we archive it after that. But unofficially, I will tell you that we don't really mess with that too much because storage has become so inexpensive. We have folks that have been with us for 10 years now, and they've got 10 years worth of data. So we guarantee at least 4 years, and then we archive it after that. And if you need it beyond that, we can turn it on for you. But it's readily available, so you've got a lot of historical data.
I think they have software in here today.
And Lisa also wants to know, will the historical data be uploaded? Normally we send them data, like if you signed up today, we would send them data from January of last year to the present to load in there. But if you would like to see longer, more historical data, we have it going back probably to 1985 or something like that. So we can probably go back as far as you need to.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm sorry, I have one other question quick.
Sure.
On the cost, did you say that you see a cost per day, or since I've seen that it's broken out like 15-minute intervals, can you get a cost per every 15 minutes, or is it broken out per day? I didn't kind of catch that. I was a little unclear on that.
I think on the cost reports, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, go ahead, Ralph. Take it away, bud.
I think on the cost reports, it's based on the data that you have showing on the screen at that time. And I wouldn't recommend anything less than a month because your demand is, on your particular rate, your demand is based on what your facility's demand is during the overall system peak day and time. So that coincident peak hour, they don't know that until after the fact, and we send it to them at the end of the month. So I wouldn't go any farther than a month, but you certainly can get an estimate for a week if that's what you want. I just don't know how accurate it'll be because of that coin peak demand.
Okay, that would be something that maybe you and I could discuss at a later time as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole point of that process, Lisa, is to really expand your mind and start looking at what's going on in your facility that's really causing your bills to go different ways and fluctuate. And once you get a handle on that, then you're way ahead of the game.
Exactly. I do all the forecasting, and I'm trying to get a better handle of our electricity usage so I can prepare and do better on my forecasting here for cost reasons. And so I was like, well, this would sounds like a good, useful tool. And if I could see the breakdown of like, oh, we had an outage today, or like what happened here, or what's going on here, I just think that would definitely help me in the future being able to forecast.
Yeah.
And we also, something that we've done is we've put our system load on the system, and all the customers can see it, not just Richmond when we log in. So since your demand is based on our system peak date and time, you can also look at that and look at the forecast for the system peak, which is very weather. I mean, it's variable, and it has a lot to do with the weather. But during those times when you think the weather is going to have an extreme high or an extreme low, you can go on there and look and see what our system peak did the day before and what was forecast for the current day, and kind of give you an idea of where the system is heading. Since a lot of your rates are based on the system peak day. Eric didn't cover the cost of this. Something that we decided to do is our P&L is going to cover the setup fee for anybody who wants to sign on and see if it's going to be a useful tool for you, and also cover the cost for the first 6 months. So there's no cost to any company that wants to sign on and do this until after that 6-month trial period, and then it'll just show up on your electric bill. So It won't be an extra invoice that you have to pay. It'll just be an extra line on the electric bill, and I think it's less than $30 per month per meter right now. In fact, I know it is, right, Eric?
Yeah, and it's right now it's at I think it's like $25.70 per meter, and that goes down over time because the deal we set up with IMPA is we have a pooled meter discount rate. So as other meters are added throughout the state and they hit certain thresholds, that goes down. So the highest it will be is $25.70. The lowest that we can get it down to is $20. So it's going to be anywhere between $20 to $25.70 a month per meter.
Yeah, and I had one customer we were talking to in person who paid, I think it was $103,000 that month, and they said they would never notice a $30 bill on, in addition to the $103,000, that $30, if it can help them save some money during that month, then they'll never even notice the $30. We don't add anything to it. It's a pass-through. Whatever the cost is, that's what we put on your bill. So we're not making anything off of this. In fact, we're paying communication charges for the meters, so we're actually giving this to you basically as a service, and then just asking those who find it a useful tool to help cover some of the costs.
Change load because you get your large power consumption.
There's no response. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Anything we need to go over? And Eric was exactly right when he talked about our rates. We would be happy to sit down and discuss the rates so that you understand them. That's part of what this tool is for, is to help you understand how you're being charged and how your usage affects your bill. You can see it with this tool. And so if you don't understand the rate, then that would be our first step, is we want to come out and go over the rate for you. One of the things he said was make sure you're on the right rate. You can certainly do those kind of comparisons with this, but right now I think we've got it set up that you can only see your rate on here. So I'd rather do that in person and review the rates with you, but we'll be happy to do that anytime. And we can go over how the power factor affects your rate. And we like to do that kind of thing in person, and that way we're sure that you understand what we're talking about and we understand what you want. So if anybody wants to do that, you should all have my email address, ralphb, R-A-L-P-H-B, @rp-l.com. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me. Or my phone number is 973-7372, and you can call me if I'm not in. Just leave me a message, and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. And Eric's guys are amazing. The things that we've asked them to do, it usually takes them about a half a day, and they've got it finished, even with some of these complex rates. I think that took them 3 days. But Mike Smith was working with them on that, one of our meter technicians, and they've got all that ironed out. So it's a good tool if you want to use it, and we'd be happy to talk more about it anytime. Eric, did you have anything else?
Well, just if somebody's interested in signing up, what do they do, Ralph? What's the next step?
Just send me an email or give me a call, and we'll get them set up.
Hey, Ralph,
okay.
This is Gary Hills. I already sent you one. I definitely would like to have this.
Okay. We'll get you set up, Gary.
And then I'll talk to finance about the upcharge just to verify 100% what it's going to upcharge is going to be, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
What will happen, Gary, when you get signed up is Ralph will coordinate a training session for you, and we'll train you like what we're doing now in a webinar type environment with your data in front of you. And you can have as many training sessions as you want. You can do as a group. You can have individual ones. It only takes about an hour to make you dangerous. You can't break it, but we'll get you going. And then if you need more training, we'll do as many training sessions as you need.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Say it is approved.
All right. Well, we appreciate all your time and hope that we've got something useful for you, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. And thanks for your time, Eric.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it. Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We will